I've thought a lot about freedom and what it means, but not just what it means, like what it would feel like, because it's not something I can say that I've ever experienced, or that I think, in honesty, anybody I really know has ever truly experienced living in this society. And I have relied on some of the greats to help me think about that and answer that question. So I really was inspired by Nina Simone, who said, "Freedom is no fear." And I think that's so powerful in the context of this work, especially because I can't say that I know anybody that's fearless. And, you know, the fear that we have is that people we love may be killed, or the fear that the young people we support have is that they themselves may lose their own lives. And that is not a fear that any child should have in a society like this, or anywhere in the world. But, you know, with the resources we have at our disposal, like, nobody should have that fear. And that's something that really breaks my heart. Being fearless, then, how do we incorporate that in our work? It's about being unapologetic. It's about saying what needs to be said, even if people don't really want to hear it. It's about speaking your truth and the truth of our community, which is, to be fair, to be honest, that we are being oppressed, and we have to fight against that. We have to fight against that. And that requires a level of fearlessness, but it's scary. And not everybody wants to stand up and talk about it. But if we don't fight for ourselves, no one's going to fight for us. And to me, unifying young people around what freedom could be for them, and help them to understand what life could feel like if they actually had freedom, not just from fear, freedom from pain, freedom from violence, but actually freedom to have a purpose, freedom to have access to opportunities in life, freedom to be anything that you want to be. Like, to me, freedom is about what you can have, not just what shouldn't happen to you. So at the 4front Project, our vision is that young people and our communities will live free from violence. And as a result of that, we are on a mission to empower young people and build peace. So we address violence by delivering specialist programs that focus on personal development, legal empowerment, and social action. And we deliver those programs in the community. We deliver them within education settings and also within criminal justice settings as well. And we work with young people to provide them with one-to-one peer emotional support, workshops. We have a boxing club. We're going to have music facilities and a music program soon as well. And just anything that the young people need to support them to live a better life is what we want to be providing. Okay, let's go on a tour of Graham Park Estate. This place is super important to me because, first of all, I grew up here, and second of all, because I've worked here since I stopped living here. So I've seen it change.
Where do you live now?
Now, I don't live far, I live about 10 minutes away in the Palm. But I've always lived in this area, and I think I've seen it change so much over the last 15 years. And it's obviously a place that's going to be, it's being regenerated. So the gentrification has started, and it's not going to be finished for another 20 years. So what that means is everybody here is kind of living in limbo. It's a very transitional time, and there's a lot of uncertainty and instability, and the people that have lost the most as part of this are the young people that grow up here, because all of the services and support that they rely on have just completely been removed. And if it wasn't for the voluntary and community sector organisations, there would be nothing here for them.
And on the regeneration, has that brought any positives? Now, obviously, you've spoken about the negatives and the other challenges that the regeneration has, brought. Has the regeneration brought any positives to the area?
There's a promise of opportunity, but like I said, the regeneration is 10 years delayed, not going to be completed for another 20 years. So what happens to all the generations that are stuck in limbo? This is, 2 generations here now that have had no access to youth services, no specialist support, very little opportunity. And they're just forgotten because it's okay. It's going to be new, it's going to be shiny, everything's going to be resolved, but not in their time, like not when they're teenagers, when they're adults. So what's in it for them? And half of our fight has been to take over these derelict buildings that have just been emptied, forgotten about, because they're going to be knocked down anyway. And that's what we've done with Unit 10. So we've taken over an old abandoned chemist that we're turning into a youth space, a healing hub, which I find ironic because it's a place where they used to give medicine, and we're going to help young people get another type of medicine in there as well. And the point of that is young people that grew up on this estate fighting the council to have access to the space that we need to just be. And half of the fight was what they wanted to charge us in rent. It's like, sorry, but we're a community organisation, a community group. and we're supporting the community by providing a space that's for young people, that's specifically for young people that have really complex needs. So why do we have to fight so hard to get access to that? And the point is, people don't think young people from areas like this deserve it because they're not valued. And what we're trying to do by changing that narrative is saying, okay, I don't really care if the whole estate's going to be knocked down in 15, 20 years. We want to have the high class facilities now, and we deserve them. Like, why not?
So why have we stopped here?
We've stopped here because this is my old house.
I swear.
This is where I used to live, number 1 Valentine. And this is where my friend Marvin lived until he was probably about 11 or 12. So he was killed a year before his 18th birthday, and like, I'm very open about the fact that that really was probably the biggest catalyst for me to set up the 4front project. And there were so many things I felt at that time.
Like what?
Rage, anger, grief, like heartbreak. Not just the loss of him as a person, but it's quite shattering. I was 15 at the time. This is the first person that I've ever known personally that this has happened to. And as a child, it kind of breaks your idea of the world. You can hear about it so much, but when you can actually feel it, the world didn't feel like a safe and secure place at all. And I felt really powerless to an extent. There was nothing I could have done to prevent it or stop it, and that there's very little that people do to try and prevent and stop this type of violence happening. And that was my kind of gateway into this type of work. But as I've often said, it took me a few years to realize, but violence shouldn't be seen in a vacuum. Like, youth violence can't be taken out of the context of all the other forms of violence in society. And so when I started reflecting on it like that, I appreciated that this was the first like real experience of youth violence that I had in my life, but I wasn't a stranger to violence. Like, I've been surrounded by violence my whole life, and actually it was that level of understanding that spurred me to want to change the narrative. Like, we can't look at it as isolated. We can't penalise and criminalise young people, but they are a product of this society, which is incredibly violent. And not just incredibly violent, but we glamorise violence, like, we're fixated by it, we love it. It's in all our media, it's everything we love to consume. Why is it okay in a film? Like, but it's not. It shouldn't be okay in real life, but there's a balance that needs to be struck, and I just feel like we do the wrong thing blaming the young people themselves. They just grow as what they know.
I think it would just be good for people watching this who have similar ideas to something like the 4front project to try and understand how you practically went about starting it.
When I first started it, there were 2 things that I wanted to do. The first one was to do with advocacy. It was about having a platform to discuss this violence, to discuss potential solutions. It was about authentic voices. It was about people with real lived experience being at the forefront of that conversation and really being able to drive any policy, any discussion about it, because it's our lives. And the second thing was actually thinking about what kind of support people need. And we discuss young people who've been affected by violence or impacted by violence. Those are not just those young people that themselves have been victims. It's also young people like me that lose people, that have lost their friends, lost their family, and are deeply impacted by it. But there's also no support services for them. And one of the things we've been really clear about in our advocacy is actually, if our society can't even get right the support that is required for young people that have been victims, then really there's no hope for the rest of us. And if we are going to focus on this issue as something that is communal, it's about community trauma, it's about how this one incident of violence ripples and impacts everybody, and how there's so many of those incidents that it's just layer on layer on layer, and how that is the depth which we need to see this issue, and the kind of solutions or approaches that we need to address it need to be tackling it from that angle. It's not about individualization, And I think I'm really proud of what we've achieved here, because there are not that many organisations that are trying to do work on both fronts, and I think you'd be misinformed to think that policy and advocacy work can happen without the frontline stuff. Everything we advocate for is because it's been influenced by what we're doing directly on the ground.
And what does the frontline work entail day to day,
so
week to week?
Day to day, the young people that we support who have been victims of serious violence, we work with them on an individual level, one-to-one peer emotional support that we provide, mentoring, access to opportunities for them. We have sessions, our workshops focus on legal empowerment, social action, which is activism, campaigning type work, and personal development as well. And we offer a range of services around that. We're often acting as appropriate adult in the police station. We're often accompanying young people to the hospital. We're often accompanying young people to court. If young people that we're working with are incarcerated, we continue that direct one-to-one support whilst they're in custody. And we don't want to be a short-term project. We want to be young adults that are present in these young people's lives, that are consistent, that are committed, that can show them love and affection, and that are ultimately just there for them.
Do you find your own well-being is at risk because of the kind of work that you do?
100%, not just myself, but my team. And leading a team that is trying to do this work and have the impact that we are having and at the level that we're doing it is so important to build the right infrastructure. So infrastructure where people have supervision, where people have clinical supervision, that's paid for through the organisation. And I think actually in terms of our advocacy, that's been one thing that we've been really strong at advocating. Like, it's not just the young people that need the support, anybody that's working with them also needs that support, because a lot of us are driven to do this work because of our own lived experience, and that's powerful. But there's a lot of training and support that people need to go through their own transition, because it won't be so powerful if you're projecting all your own issues onto the people that you're supporting or trying to save them. It's not about saving them, it's about supporting people to make changes in their own lives. And ultimately, it's not a canvas for us to live out our own or try and resolve our own traumatic experiences.